Right. We're all on the record now. Thank you so much for that introduction, Rebecca, and thank you to you and to Liz for facilitating this meeting on behalf of the ALC today. It arises from a meeting that we had with you about 10 days ago. There's obviously a need to have done it. And in a sense, apologies everybody, we haven't managed to get around to doing this before, but I'm sure you'll appreciate that this has been an ever-evolving picture, including what the asks are from government seem to change on an almost weekly basis. So today, what we'd like to do is just introduce you, and I hope some of you may have had a chance to have a look at the slides already that were distributed in advance. So I don't want to sort of grind you through a PowerPoint presentation very slowly, but what we'd like to touch upon, in essence, is what the governing idea, so to speak, is that Devon County is favouring at the moment, although I should say it has yet to go before a meaningful vote of Cabinet, which will be on November the 18th, after a consultative council on November the 14th. But this is the leading idea on the basis of the research and discussions we've had so far. Just to give a picture of what we've been doing, I mean, a typical day for me would be I was with the police earlier today, the fire service on Friday. We're talking to NHS tomorrow. And in terms of what we're trying to do is reach out to as many stakeholders as we can. Now, that isn't just because, to tick boxes. That's because we will have to do that moving forward. And the parishes and towns are crucial to this. So in terms of background, I've been a parish councillor for, I think it's 18, maybe 19 years now, and deeply sympathise with the concerns that we've been hearing from parishes, and especially, I think, from some of the larger towns, about subjects like assets and where that is likely to land. And the truth is that in the period of time we've had, which has in essence been from late May, early June until about a fortnight's time, it hasn't been possible to do a vast amount of work with the parishes and towns on the subject of future assets. I know some districts have. I know East Devon, my district, has to a certain extent. But this is a piece of work that will definitely be a priority after the letters go in submission, because in many senses, the submission letters outline the main principles according to the six basic ideas. Liz, Rebecca, do we want to share the slides, do you think, and work through those, or what's the best thing to do?
Yeah, I can share the slides.
Okay.
Can everyone see those okay?
Brilliant. Yeah. Next slide, please, as they say. Okay. Lovely. So I think you're familiar with all of that, everybody. That's where it's all come from. One of the difficulties we have had is that it was clear in last year's Labour manifesto that devolution would happen, but not that local government reorganisation would happen. And this was sprung on the local government community really only in December. There was a first helter-skelter attempt to get some basic ideas in March. Some difficulty was created because the then Devon County Council politically sought to go for a big one, Devon and Torbay, and, depending on your perspective, a corollary of that would have been cancelled elections in May. So that was one of the reasons that wasn't favoured at that time by most people. The key part of this slide, for when you're looking at it again afterwards, or you have already, are the 6 exam questions. And those are critical there. Whatever gets put in has to cope with the whole of Devon, is what the first bullet point says. The second one basically says it has to make financial sense. The third one says we mustn't threaten the existing services. Now, the things that we've been particularly concerned are the big ticket items that, as parish and town councils and districts, to be frank, we don't deal with day in, day out. It's adult and children's social services and education. So if I look at my budget as leader of East Devon, it's 25 million a year, and we are the biggest district. The budget for Devon County is 2 billion, of which about 1.5 billion of that is people services. And this is the thing we need to consider very carefully, what the risk is to those if we break those up too much. The fourth bullet point there is about local views and councils working together. Well, that's events like this and more. Structures must support devolution arrangements. Well, that's becoming tricky, and I'll give you a heads up now to where I think this may go. I don't think that we're going to achieve mayoral strategic status in the lifetime of this Parliament. I was meeting with the leaders of Somerset, Dorset, and Wiltshire the other day, who are ready to be a mayoral authority. They are already certain they're not going to achieve that before 2029. Devon is well down the list then, particularly since Cornwall doesn't want to come in. And so once we've done the submission, which we were required to do, it's a statutory submission on the 28th of November, the political question will almost immediately arise, and certainly I will be part of that correspondence to government. Are you giving us a mayor? And if you're not, what is the point in us smashing up what we're doing at the moment? However, that's not for today. That's just a heads up about where this may go. And then the sixth point there is around neighbourhood empowerment. Well, that is these neighbourhood area committees that I'll come to in a second. Next slide, please. So those are all the various proposals. I'm sure you're bored, sick with them all by now, and you know them inside and out. New Devon, the 145, 451, whatever you want to call it. There's Plymouth expanding out of its own boundaries into South Hams. There's Greater Exeter, which is expanding into all sorts of places, into Timbridge, into East Devon, and then what Plymouth and Exeter are going to propose for the rest of us is something they call rural and coastal Devon. And our view of that, to be honest, is that Greater Exeter wishes to include towns such as Budleigh Salterton, Exmouth, Lympston, Topsham, Dawlish, Teignmouth. And the last time I looked, those were coastal Devon. So we don't think that makes a great deal of sense, that one, and we will certainly be saying that. I've mentioned the devolution of mayoralty, and that is one thing that has united us all. All councils wrote to the Secretary of State, the former Secretary of State, Angela Rayner, many months ago, saying, we do that, can we get on with it? And we had a letter back basically saying, we note your letter, thank you. Collaboration has been important, and again, you'll hear all sorts of stuff here. There are millions, literally, of data sets and bits of financial information about how all the councils are currently run, what the structure is, what the real spending is. All of this has been put in some enormous, great sort of 2001 Space Odyssey-like black computer in Plymouth, and all councils have been able to draw from that same set of data to reach their conclusions. I'm going to be very frank with you now. You will find that different conclusions are reached by different authorities on the basis, quite possibly, of the hypothesis that they put that data through. That happens. It shouldn't be a reason for people to fall out, but if you look at Surrey, for example, there were three governing ideas in Surrey that came forward from the Surrey community. All of them were consulted on through KPMG, and KPMG came up with three separate answers depending upon who commissioned them. Next one, please. So there we go. You can see it. We got to the 28th of November. I've mentioned the meaningful dates at county. You'll find your districts are probably going much closer to the deadline in that last week before the 28th. We will continue consultation into the new year, but we won't actually know what is the government's preferred choice until July 2026. We're hoping to hear quite quickly into the new year which choice or choices they wish us to consult on. So again, the experience we've had, this is a consistently moving feast. We've all sat in dozens of webinars. I'm sure you have as well. I know a lot of you would have been up at NALC in Leicester last week. I understand that the civil servant who was put up there didn't distinguish themselves particularly well. That's been our experience as well. We see that government has the most monumental capacity problem in getting this through, which feeds into the narrative, will this actually happen? But all things exactly, why smash up what we have now? But so vesting day will be April 2028, if that happens, with elections in May 2027, shadow unitaries, but you would have some of the existing authorities would carry on in a kind of extra year as the shadow unitaries worked as well. Next one, please. I'll try and hammer through this as fast as possible. Okay, so that is the one that New Devon, we're calling it. Why not New Labour, New Devon? Got to be called something. It isn't Devon County Council. Something I would want to assure everybody here of is, I hope I have a reputation for being quite challenging for officers. This is not Devon County Council by another name. Everybody who is currently employed by any of the councils effectively gets a P45 at the end of this process. Of course, they can and should try and TUPE their way back into various jobs. But the Unitary Council idea has come, that we think it's the strongest idea, has come from looking at the data about how viable we think other alternatives are, and we don't think they're as viable as New Devon, but in particular this immense concern of the risks of what happens if you disaggregate or break up adult and children's social services. So you'll all know that Devon County Council has been criticised in the past for the quality of its children's services and has been put in special measures and so forth. At the moment, we have clear indications coming from, and this is all monitored by central government, that Devon County Council is very much it has turned the corner, is on what they call an improvement journey. And we would be very concerned indeed if too much were to happen to affect that good work. And now, of course, you could say it could be done by the smaller councils, but you would have definitely a period of transition, and particularly chaotic. So the neighbourhood area committees, we would be looking at possibly 16. And on those, well, let's go to, can we go forward a slide? Let's go forward to another one. Now keep going through that stuff as well, if we can. I'd like to get to the neighbourhood. There we go. Right. So what is a neighbourhood area committee? And what are its roles? Let's go to membership. Let's go to the membership slide, if we can, please, Rebecca. Which is right. Go back. How are you doing? Keep going back up. There we go. That's the key one. Now, a lot of you older people in the room like me will remember that these things have been talked of before in Devon and didn't happen, 30, 40 years ago. However, they are now in place in unitaries where they're running quite well, for example, in Wiltshire and in North Yorkshire. In Somerset, it's been a much more mixed picture. And I think the argument there is that because Somerset has gone through a process of a kind of difficult evolution, we would be having a big bang. So if you look at that slide, you can see going from the top, you would have 6 or 7 unitary council elected members sitting on the committee. So what this is designed to do is to try and make up for the democratic deficit that the abolition of districts causes. Crucially, then, there are representatives from town and parish councils. Now, that's how we do that, how we do it is, of course, a matter for the new unitary ultimately. But how we do that is up to you who you would want to send along. Is it clerk and chair and vice chair or whatever? Is there a requirement to be at every meeting? These are all things we need to consult and have an open discussion on. Devon's quite unique. It's got a couple of national parks, so they would need to be represented. Again, the voluntary sector as well. Now, these are ideas such as the voluntary sector. We're not pulling out of the thin air. This is what's been suggested by government as well. There would be a role for local businesses or chambers of commerce. And I know many chambers of commerce are excellent and some of them aren't so good. So, we just have to look at that very carefully. And then on the basis of an idea that has been, knocking around, hasn't it, for all century, the big society, whatever you want to call it, the one public piece, there would be a role for the police and for the fire service and for the NHS in this as well, and schools and colleges. Now, it wouldn't be expected that at every single meeting, let's say for sake of argument, there were 10 meetings a year, all of those people were there, because that wouldn't make sense. They'd sit there, it would be a talking shop. But you could certainly set certain agendas to make sure that those contributions were heard from there. Can I just go back to the one that's the pyramid one, please, Rebecca? So that's the principle. There you are, towns and parishes. And as I said, we already hear and know that a lot of towns and parishes are either anxious or optimistic about potentially taking on assets. We all have to be very careful about eyes not being bigger than tummies here in some places. I know of towns where there are currently council-owned, soon to be abolished council-owned cinemas, theatres, swimming pools. This is going to be a very complex conversation and financial conversation about who really wants to take on what. There are issues around car parks as well, and who would want to take things on. So you then get up to, we think about 17 neighbourhood area committees covering a population of about 50,000, and each of them would have 6 to 7 unitary members on. And then if you go up to the top of the pyramid, that is the new unitary council. We think there'd be about 120 elected members for a population of 820,000. So going down to the next slide, please, Rebecca, which is the role of neighbourhood area committees. And the next two slides are, I think, really crucial in this because they offer what the possibilities are. So possibly we've covered quite a lot of those already, but coming from below, strategic plans, holding the unitary to account, working as a network, convening local partners and actors, data sharing with all the existing authorities in the area, building local action plans, setting local priorities. If you go down to the next slide, please, then. The other thing is that what you wouldn't expect is for these neighbourhood area committees to get off to a hard start on day one, particularly around the powers that they wish to take down. And we don't know yet which powers are going to be allowed because the legislation hasn't been passed. But I think, speaking for Devon County at the moment, we would like to see as many powers as possible to those neighbourhood area committees who wished it to be passed down. So you're looking there at placemaking, you're looking at parks and gardens, crematoria, etc. There is the possibility that the committees spend the localities budgets, which are currently sit with the individual councillors, and as many of you have noticed, tend to get spent every 4 years in the run-up to an election. There's the piece there about working with all the other authorities. Would those neighbourhood area committees take on responsibility for local licensing, for local planning in time as well? Planning is obviously the big one here. Developing action plans and indeed going to meeting up with other people. So how would they be supported? If you go down 2 slides, please, Rebecca, beyond the little pie chart thing, and then the next one. Right. this is the big question. There's no point setting them up if they haven't got any resources. So the new unitary would have a cabinet member whose sole job was to do neighbourhood area committees. There would be project officers within the unitary to work with them as well, data leads, obviously IT and so forth. And you can see there that at the moment, so many of you will go to HATOC committees and whatever. There'll be that same support, but, and this is interesting, there'll be an opportunity to interact more closely with children's and adult services. You'll know that many of your district councils are very active in economic and regeneration work, as is county. You get stuck into that a bit more, and again, potentially housing planning, licensing, and public. Others, question mark, means we'd love to hear what other things you'd like to see done. At a boardroom level, an officer top board level, there would be a director right at the top level who would have specific responsibility for these localities. Because another question that always arises is, well, what if they start off and administration changes and they just want to scrap them? Well, we need to set it in stone so that that can't happen. And obviously then there are opportunities for the unitary to help with training and procurement and so forth. Could you go down to the next slide, please? So this is the stuff we parish councils are all quite good at doing, and we all quarrel with each other about whether it's the best thing or not. But how often should it be? Monthly? 6 times a year? Don't know. Up to whatever you think it should be. Should it be virtual? Well, as we know, despite the fact that government have promised now, I think it's going on for, as soon as they came in, that they would legislate to make virtual meetings fully possible. We're still in a grey area there, aren't we? Would you want to meet if you've got 2 or 3 substantial communities in your neighbourhood area? Would you wish to move them around? I've mentioned already that you'd have a portfolio holder in cabinet there. All cabinet members will be required to work with the localities. That's the other thing. That will be part of the governance piece at the unitary. They just can't sit there claiming their allowance and not actually getting stuck in with their localities. And then finally, the meaningful vote piece, the meaningful votes as we understand it at the moment, to go from the neighbourhood area committee upstairs, so to speak, to the unitary. The meaningful votes would be the unitary councillors casting those votes, but you should be able to devise governance arrangements so that when a matter is discussed and when it comes to a vote, there should be a meaningful advisory vote within those neighbourhood area committees. But obviously the devil would be in the detail. Right, now, geographies. I'm terrified of this slide. So bear in mind, that's the next one down, please. Hopefully none of you can see it very well. So this is going to be a nightmare. Now, at the moment, one of the things the government has said is try not to, or don't, smash up parish and town boundaries, district boundaries, NHS boundaries, all of this, be careful. So what we're trying to do is align this as much as possible with, as you can see there, the neighbourhood health plan boundaries. So I'm sure some of you will already have looked at this and God, I don't want to be in with that. Oh, this is all wrong and whatever. So this is a first draft. It's above all else, this is something we need to hear from people about to see if these areas can work. And you'll always know, I think it's like the Midlothian question. It always comes down to, I think it's the Cholmondeley question. It's very difficult. What is North Devon? What is Torridge? What is Mid Devon? There's a sort of, and then you've got Dartmoor. Who do you put in with whom? And so this is obviously a very serious thing we'll get to, but this is the essential principle at the moment. So if we go to the last slide, and then I'll shut up, and we've got plenty of time left. So those are the basics. So I know you all understand this because you're experts in your fields. So you already know that town and parish councils remain as they are. You also know that there are options that will be available moving forward for town and parish councils to take on certain things as well. And again, I mentioned that earlier, great, but also be careful what you wish for. Exeter is a challenge because it doesn't have any parish or town councils at the moment. Now, some people have said the government have explicitly said you can't invent new parishes through this process. Our understanding from MHCLG that you definitely can, because they're going to have to be flexible. And then the final point is that there'd be help there supporting training and development. So sorry to pelt through those at some pace. I'll now shut up, and under the advice of Rebecca and Liz, happy to take any questions or for anybody else to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. So as I said earlier, we'll start going through the questions. There's been quite a few coming in the chat. So first of all, from Philip, who's just commenting on what you were saying about sort of why smash up what we have now. Just saying, obviously, something has to change because councils are running out of money. The current position isn't sustainable. So if not a unitary, then what?
Yeah, I think we could all agree with that. Unfortunately, we know the rural payment settlement that's let us down. We're waiting for the budget. We're waiting for the financial settlement in December for all councils, and the heads up we're getting is it's terrible news again for Devon. So it's true that it's not sustainable. My district, which I would say is well run, East Devon, we're okay for a couple of years. We've done the medium-term financial plan. If we have to go on for a third year, we're looking at ourselves thinking, how on earth are we going to have to do it? So there is I suppose, I mean, the truth is, and I met Baroness Taylor, she's still there. They didn't sack her. She's in the Lords dealing with this as the minister. The Chancellor does not expect any savings to be made. She does not expect a penny back to the Chancellery for her to spend on anything else. It's a political project, is the truth, and the real truth is it's just the fact the Labour government don't wish to carry on with what are traditionally the Conservative shires. They want to break that up, and that's, I would say, why we're being put through this.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Alan has asked, you mentioned that whatever proposals come up, they've got to consider the whole of Devon. We've obviously talked about 155, 119, Greater Exeter, Greater Plymouth. He's just asking, why has a one Devon option not emerged, as in including Plymouth, Torbay and Exeter?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. Well, first of all, the political reality is Plymouth just wouldn't go for that. So we mustn't forget, and again, I don't want to be too political here, but it is a Labour government. Plymouth are an existing unitary. They are about to get tens of millions of pounds in massive military nuclear investment, and they will expand as an industrial and they want to carry on doing that. So they just wouldn't have agreed to be in. Torbay is also an existing unitary. It's small. If they wish to invent themselves now, you could argue they wouldn't qualify on the number that they've got, but they do exist, and there are other places in places like Rutland that similarly are very small, and they're currently delivering all the services that a unitary would do. Another idea, some people would say would have been the simplest, is Plymouth in one and Exeter in the other, and just cut it down the middle, either that way or that way. Those haven't proved possible either, because in essence, Exeter and Plymouth aren't particularly interested in being the centre of those. So yeah, thank you.
Chris has commented on how it needs to make financial sense. Whatever proposal goes forward needs to make financial sense to towns and parishes. They obviously don't want to be in a position where there is double taxation. So how will that play out in terms of asset transfers?
Well, and I'm very aware that a lot of councils keen to, say a lot, some town councils perhaps, who are thinking, well, we might wish to take on assets. Their argument is they need to start thinking about precept raising potentially for this forthcoming financial year, so as to sort of, start building up the piggy bank, so to speak. And I can't really help with that at the moment because we just don't know. It's just really irritating. It's going to be a local political choice for the parish councils, really. In terms of those assets, again, You know, if somebody was a friend, would I advise them to take on a swimming pool, knowing what I know as a district leader about the hell on earth that is? Because it's not just about covering the revenue costs of it, which is possible. It's when the roof falls off, or the boilers go wrong, and you're in for hundreds of thousands of pounds, particularly as net zero requirements, God bless them, are being imposed as well.
Yeah, I'm just happy to add in there, Paul, just to support you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming today. I'm Donna, Chief Executive of Devon County Council. There is guidance that comes forward during the process in terms of how we all need to work together in terms of assets, and that guidance is being reviewed at this moment in time. When we get that from the government, then we'll make sure that that is circulated as soon as possible. The district and county political leadership are meeting next week, and that's one of the matters that we will have on the agenda, but we'll make sure that all the guidance is circulated to you on any form of assets and processes.
Thank you, Donna. Sorry, I'm doing a lot of talking. So it's critical here. We've got Kerry Denton, who's the lead officer at Devon, who's been working on this alongside me, and then Donna Manson, who's the chief executive. And in particular, Donna has got a huge amount of personal expertise in children's services. And again, this is a difficult part of all this landscape because as parish and town councillors, we don't really do it. We don't really do it as district councils either. And so I think perhaps, who knows, who knew? Donna can't just make up. She can't just say appoint a new director of children's services because she fancies it. That has to be cleared by government. Their government is really watching all of this as well, and sometimes we can all get a bit parochial. But anyway, sorry, Rebecca.
Thank you. Jeanette's just asked, where does adult education sit?
Paul, do you want me to answer that one?
Thanks, Kerry.
Yeah, no problem. I think I've seen it in chat already, but adult skills becomes or is going to be shortly a combined county authority transfer from government down to the local area, and they will be responsible for things like the adult education budget. In terms of things like adult community learning, that is a Department for Education funded service operated across the whole of the county council geography. So under the new Devon proposal, leading option, there wouldn't be a change, but obviously under any of the other options, there would need to be a disaggregation of that grant into whatever new unitaries were put into place.
Thanks, Kerry. And just anyone who missed the introduction when you came in, we're going to go through questions in the chat first, and then we'll be going to raised hands. So Susan has said, given the combined county authority, and obviously all the things that that's dealing with and how that's working across Devon and Torbay, she's wondering how anything other than 911 could work.
I'm just happy to come in there and say that in terms of our financial analysis, 911 provides the most financially viable option moving forward, and also presents the opportunity at scale to deal with the challenges that we've got. So we're expecting our financial analysis to evidence that point.
Thanks, Donna. Stephen's asked, how do neighbourhood area committees make decisions that are legal and binding on a new unitary?
Kerry, how are you feeling on that one?
Well, I'm not, first things first, I am not a lawyer, but as Paul has already introduced, we would be looking through our structural change order to provide the governance and oversight framework against which neighbourhood area committees could ultimately make those decisions locally. Obviously, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to get to that position, and we would very much wish to work with DALC and in fact your working group that you've already created, working with us to help shape that in such a way that it works obviously for town parish councils, the new unitary elected members and partners at that local level. So it's not something that is provided for legally at the moment. Neighbourhood area committees are more in the advisory space, but absolutely our ambition would be to ensure that there were legal powers able to devolve services, functions and budgets to the local area.
Thanks, Kerry. And another one on neighbourhood area committees from Louisa. How much of the suggested roles of neighbourhood area committees has been predetermined by central government? We've been given to understand that these are yet undefined. So she just wants to clarify, is this DCC's proposal for towns and parishes to consider, and where's that come from?
Yes.
So yes, well, I'm happy just to lead on that. Is that we've been using? There are examples, not necessarily to say exemplars across the country. We're not inventing the wheel, we're not reinventing the wheel, but we're trying to improve it. And to be honest with you, and one of the reasons we're coming to you now is we've been thinking, it's been particularly focused over the last 5 or 6 weeks. That's that particular work stream. And we need to hear more from you about that. I know people always say that, but that is the case about how we shape these. Also, of course, it will be important to hear what the statutory instrument and what the legislation says about what they can do. That's a critical piece in all of this. But we'd like to them be. I mean, I've seen in the chat. I think I can see people thinking, oh, well, you just reinvent. You're putting in another layer of government. But don't forget what you're doing is the districts are disappearing altogether, and the county is being abolished. The alternative to having neighbourhood area committees is to have one might say, all-powerful unitary here, and then a great chasm, and then towns and parish and councils down there. And, well, you may think that's desirable. I'm not so sure. Kerry, did you want to come in on that one as well at all?
No, I would have said what you've just said, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Amy's asked, how do you ensure that the NACs are able to do something meaningful? And how would you ensure consistency across the NACs to make sure that some areas are not at a disadvantage?
Well, that's, again, it's a bloody good question. Sorry, it's a very good question. And it's going to come down to individual and collective responsibility. We all know, I'm sure none of the people here are, but I've been to a few terrible parish councils and a few brilliant parish councils. It's going to come down to what you put in. I saw somebody saying in the chat around allowances for people to. So as a parish council, I've never claimed a penny in Colleton. I know elsewhere there are allowances. I think that's something that I think perhaps an idea would be to look at attendance allowances, which is what used to happen, back in the day, to try and encourage people to come along. But again, in the new unitary, if it adopts the model we're suggesting, with that director level leadership, portfolio level leadership in cabinet as well, and the supporting officers, then those unitary councillors pushing up through the county and saying, through the unitary, and saying, this is what we want to do. It does become a political discussion, of course it does. So you can't promise all things to all people, but it's a forum.
Thanks, Paul. And Stephen's asked, would DCC's proposal accept the district council proposals to transfer services before the structural change order?
As I said earlier, the guidance on what's happened in all the unitarisations in the last 6 years is being looked at and considered, because there has been sadly some unintended consequences. So we're working with government to look at, and we've had a specific meeting with government to make sure that in terms of how the process is managed between now and vesting day, that's reviewed, and that we get clear guidance from government on what that should look like. As I said earlier, we will share that as soon as that is forthcoming, but it is a key point of what happens when, to make sure whatever the future is sustainable. And there's a lot of learning to take place in terms of what's happened to date and those previous unitarisations, and I know that that's being considered currently to improve that process. So there is clear guidance for everyone to follow.
Thanks, Donna. Trying to go through the chat. There's lots of some really interesting discussion happening there as well. Liz has asked, will the current Devon and Parish Council boundaries with Plymouth City Council remain in this Devon model? Which I think is yes, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, so our submission is that Plymouth stays within its current borders, absolutely. As we understand it, the further you get from Plymouth, the less chuffed the parishes are to become part of a greater Plymouth unitary. Yeah, but our proposal is Plymouth, you're Plymouth.
Thank you. People ask about the slides as well. We will be sending out the slides again, and they'll be on the website along with a recording of this as well. Amy saying, are you envisaging that the NACs will not consider planning matters and that there will be separate area planning committees based on existing local plans? She could see the NACs time being fully taken up with planning applications otherwise. And I know we had quite a few sort of comments about planning as well, generally, and where that will sit.
So that really is TBC and to be discussed. And it really is subject to the legislation. Don't forget, we have a government that is saying, and I wish he hadn't said build, baby, build, but he did. You would guess that they're not going to do anything that's going to make it easier. But we already know how neighbourhood plans are being frankly disrespected but that happened after the last government, which is tragic, I think. But who knows? Who knows as it moves forward? Maybe through the neighbourhood committees, they can be more powerful in developing even more powerful sort of micro local plans, so to speak, that they can then push up. But where it ultimately sits, we're not sure. And one of the grey areas there is about the mayor. And again, as we've gone through the year, the government has sent completely different signals about what a mayor can do. The mayor suddenly, oh yes, they're going to do education. They were going to do higher education. Maybe they'll do all of education. They're going to do all of the economy. I tell you what, let's give them planning as well. So we don't know yet, and I think it's in our interest for all of us as Devon to work collectively together to put up the best answer we can on planning.
Thanks, Paul. Sheila asked, what about parishes that are non-political, as it appears that DCC will be a political organisation?
So yeah, as I understand it, most parishes, if not nearly all of them, there are very few towns that are actually you're voted in as a Lib Dem, Conservative, Labour, Reform, Green, whatever, or Independent. So that's an interesting question. The neighbourhood area committees, you're not elected to be on them, so it's sort of that's not the thing, is it really? And what parishes choose to do as they evolve, they can, I suppose, become political if they wish, but it's not on the agenda.
Thank you. Actually, I see there was a question in the chat, which I think you've already answered in the chat, actually, Paul, where Chris has said, will towns be asked to take on liabilities while the unitary authority takes on all the income generating assets?
My friend in Sidmouth there, yes. I get mixed messages from Sidmouth. Either give me everything or, we don't want that. It's a huge conversation to have. But I put in a slightly facetious answer there. It would be incredibly stupid to dump stuff onto towns and parishes. And of course, it can't be done either. Well, I suppose you could say it could be done by making certain assets non-viable unless the towns and parishes stepped up. But that is the opposite of what we would intend. That would be absolutely wicked to do that. And I think it's also going to be very hard. I mean, there are, across Devon, there's some wonderful work going on with various leisure strategies, for example, that are really designed to protect infrastructure like swimming pools, like sports pitches and so forth. But that, again, is another big work stream that we'll need to look at together.
Thank you. Julie's got a question about neighbourhood area committees, asking, will they be fully funded by the new council and have their own budgets, or would there be an expectation for towns and parishes, police, etc., to precept for that?
Well, we've heard enough from me. Kerry, come on.
Okay.
I'm quite happy to say the review, because it's part of the elected representative, there would need to be funds available to make sure that it was running democratically with the right level of support to do that in terms of committee structures and so on. So yes, we would expect that there would be a budget to make sure that neighbourhood area committees can function appropriately according to the governance that's set out. I think it's also important to say, I note the point that neighbourhood area committees are running differently across the country. We have looked at the examples in Yorkshire or Somerset or Wiltshire. There is space in the legislation for the Secretary of State to be open to how those neighbourhood committees are shaped up into the future. So that will be an ongoing development, and there are lessons again to be learned from how they're operating in different places. I'm just happy to pick up the comments about the financials at the same time. We do have a data hub that the 11 councils have all put their data into. It's a shared hub, so we are all working from the same data. Yes, Councillor Belthorne, I agree with your point that, you know, how people analyse layers of the data will be different. The key is that the Treasury, the proposals and the business cases that go in will be assessed by different departments of government, and the Treasury will look at that to validate any proposal. In terms of, from a Devon County Council point of view, any professional officer assessment, such as the 151 finance officer, I have asked that other 151 officers in the country validate the professional judgment of our own officers. So if there's statutory officers making statements, whether it's the Director of Public Health, Director of Adult Services or Children's Services or Finance, that is all validated by other officers in the country. But ultimately, I would expect that the Treasury will look at all options and feedback through that process.
And I think I'm really glad you said that, Donna, because county is being questioned. Oh, you know, are you sharing data? Yes. Then, as Donna and Kerry both know, Julian Brazil, the leader, and I are essentially half man, half anarchist. We will not have the wool pulled over our eyes ever by any officer. So we have really challenged on this, and I'm very happy to say that I am completely satisfied that the work that Devon County has done on this has been outstanding, both on the risks and on the finances. And I would add that I think that's been a more challenging space for the district councils, because children, adults services aren't something, and the social health area aren't something they've really had to do before. And again, 25 million I spend at East Devon. Donna spends 2 billion at county. So, but I think we've managed to get through this quite well, the councils, without really falling out with each other too badly. And I think when the letters go in at the end of November, we all take a breath, take a week off, start it all again, and then we're out there talking to all you people. By the way, there has been quite a lot of, you can't really call it consultation because it's wrong, because it hasn't been formal consultation. There's been a lot of engagement out there. I know the districts have provided sessions such as this as well, or some of the districts have, certainly through DALC and other means. Devon has been sending a couple of vans out that have been going out and meeting lots of people. I think it's 6,000, well over 6,000 at the moment, engagements. So there's been listening there. Anyway, that wasn't the question. I'll shut up.
Thank you. Mike's asked, where and how does the Plymouth Freeport area, which extends well beyond Plymouth, link into this?
Kerry, that's your specialty, isn't it?
Hey, right. Well, the Freeport is a designation by government, so the designation would remain. Devon County Council, South Hams District Councils are partners in that Freeport designation. So whatever new unitary structure is put in place for our part of the world, that would have to be a consideration, in the same as the enterprise zone designations as well. It's a really good point of detail that we absolutely recognise still needs to be worked through, dependent on the final option that is resulting. There is a Freeport company that's created, and we have board representation on that. That would also have to change, so some of the governance would have to flow through, dependent on the structure.
Thank you, Kerry. So I think there's 2 more in the chat, and then we can go to John, who's been waiting very patiently. So Susan's asked about the Grand Western Canal. and whether that will be taken over by a unitary or would need to be a separate organisation backed by parish councils.
Donna, that's one of your favourites, isn't it?
Well, Meg is on the call, Paul, so
okay.
might come forward to answer this.
Go on.
Sorry,
Where is
Meg.
Meg? I can't see, because it's Zoom, I can't see anybody apart from who's speaking at the moment.
That's all right, Paul, don't worry. So because the canal sits...
sorry, Meg, do you want to introduce who you are? Because quite possibly we haven't done that yet, so people may not know.
Sorry, I'm Meg Booth. I'm the Director of Climate Change, Environment and Transport. So Grand Western Canal's I'm lucky to have one as one of my assets at the moment. So clearly, whoever ends up with the canal in their area will have the responsibility for managing the asset. What I would say is that it's not an easy asset to maintain, as I'm sure any of you who've lived near the canal, we had the breach, 12, 13 years ago on the canal. There are a lot of historic structures on it as well. So I don't think it's something that people would want necessarily to take on because of the liabilities that come with it. But certainly it would be transferring to whichever unitary it would sit in at the time of the transfer.
Thanks, Meg. And the final one from the chat here is, any plans to include transport providers in the NACs?
That would almost certainly, transport providers are aligned really into the new county combined authority, because that is now, well, from the 1st of April will be the transport authority for the Devon and Torbay area.
Thanks, Meg. Okay, so John, do you want to come in with your question?
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you.
And thank you, Paul, for your presentation. I'm the Vice Chair of Newton St Sides Parish Council. I have concerns which I see have been touched on quite a lot in the chat about funding, when responsibilities and powers devolved downwards, that funding won't necessarily follow. This is something which actually we're seeing already, particularly in the area of traffic and highways. We're expected to deal with more and more of the problems that arise with traffic and highways, pothole repairs, erection of road signs and so on, without any funding being devolved to the parish councils. And my concern is that this change will accelerate that process, and that those of us who sit at the bottom rung of the ladder will find more and more responsibilities put on our shoulders without the necessary resources to be able to meet that. Is there anything that anybody can say that will reassure me that that would not happen?
Well, first of all, John, thank you for that point, and that's heard and recorded and noted, and I completely agree with you. And that mustn't happen. There's a fine line, isn't there, here between, wouldn't it be great to have neighbourhood area committees where you're getting a more efficient, perhaps, method than a HATOC committee? That thing we all always say, don't we? God, there's a hold outside there. It's been there for months. I could have filled it myself. That whole thing about how we capture the imagination of those local communities to get that work done more quickly, and then the peril that the financial liability for that somehow gets passed down. So that would be the law of unintended consequence. But Meg, as Transport Director at the moment, will you have a comment on that as well?
I think from my point of view, what we've done is try to enable communities who want to do things for themselves to do that. We haven't said we're not filling potholes in communities, but what we're saying to communities is, if you want to fill holes which are not a safety defect, we will assist you with that if that's what you want to do. And I think that's been our starting point for a lot of the discussions that we've had. This isn't about us saying we won't do something. It's about the prioritization of communities, and if they are feeling very strongly that they want something which is not a priority for us, then we will try and enable that wherever we can.
I think the other possibility, John, maybe is that long lost figure of the parish length person. And would it be possible within the neighbourhood area committees and with the money that's then available to them to have one who's actually covering that area? And that may be a potential efficiency and a gain out of this, but hypothetically.
Yeah, thank you. And Julie.
Thank you, and thank you, Paul, for your presentation. Yeah, my question, I just couldn't word it to put it in the chat, sorry. It's just too complicated. I'm just thinking about these differences, the 911 that county is putting forward and the 541, which is coming through from the districts. And hearing what Paul was saying was about the issues to do with the adult and children's services with funding, and that's kind of your driver for the 911, then presumably that means that will be to the detriment then of services that are currently provided by the districts, because all that council tax, some goes to county, some goes to the districts, would go into the new council with a view to meeting that shortfall. So that slightly concerns me. But my main question actually was relating to the 541. I'm in 4 because I'm based in Oakhampton, so we would sit in the 4, which does include Torbay. To form one authority with Torbay, whereas your 911 keeps Plymouth and Torbay separate now as they were. And I was just wondering in how the funding or the costings have been looked at. I'm sure you have all taken that into account, but whether county has, because I presume the districts would have done perhaps more so than county, which might explain some differences.
Well, if I come perhaps to Donna in a second, Julie, for the sort of financial take on that. But you've also perhaps, serendipitously highlighted one of the problems with the 451, which if we end up at 451, we end up at 451. People will make it work. The problem with it is Torbay don't want to be in the 4 and Exeter don't want to be in the 5. And that is going to be, if you imagine you're sitting up there, Secretary of State, and here's Devon, the Devon box is slammed on your desk. I think that's, I'm not saying that's Achilles' heel for both of those, but it's not going to be politically helpful to those. And I think that was one of the reasons, speaking personally, I felt that we needed to come up with an alternative to that as well. Because otherwise there was a real risk, there remains a risk, that there is a current government-led choice to give Plymouth what they want, which is Plymouth plus 13 parishes, and then Exeter, honestly, Exeter's expansion map is, in my view, just not credible. And then the rest of us run from Barnstable, which is the idea that Exeter and Plymouth are kindly writing to government to say that's their idea for Devon. And if you can remember one of those exam questions right at the beginning of this, it is that any answers that go to government, any letters that we put in on November 28th, must be for the benefit of everybody in Devon. I don't think the Exeter or the Plymouth ones do that. But Donna, can I come to you maybe on Julie's question about the financial side of that?
Yeah, I think it's important to say that all councils in the Devon area, I'll exclude Torbay and Plymouth from that, but other district councils and county councils got the poorest settlement in England last year financially, along with Yorkshire. There's a huge reduction in funding, both at district level and at county level, linked to the removal of the Rural Services Infrastructure Grant, which was £15 million collectively. The spending review tells us that that reduction in funding to rural areas will continue over the next 3 years at scale, and unless it changes in December, another loss of £10 million for Devon, and more money taken out of the districts as well. So the financial settlements currently are not looking positive. It's important to say that in terms of adults and children's, we prioritise based on need. What our analysis tells us that if you break up the Devon area for different children's and adult services, one area will be worse off significantly compared to another area. Whereas if you hold it together, what you're able to do is continue to prioritise on need for children's and adult services. So there would be a winner and a loser if you begin to split it up. So it's important to say that. I think what is really important in terms of the finances moving forward, and this is the opportunity with, rather than breaking up the councils in Devon, but bringing them together, there will be areas where we can make efficiencies. So, for example, we won't need 11 chief executives, we won't need 11 finance officers, we won't need 11 monitoring officers, and so on and so forth. So we would expect to make reductions in senior staff. In terms of frontline staff, it's important to say that all the staff are out there at the moment who work for districts or work for county. It is likely they will all remain in place. It's more about how we join some of the corporate functions to save money. But it's important to say the monies that we will save will only help us to cope with the pressures that we're facing. You know, it'll make efficiencies. It will enable us to buy contracts at scale, to commission at scale, to get a better deal. But everything that we make by being more efficient will only go towards helping the financial pressures, along with, if things prevail, that significant reduction in funding to rural areas across the country.
Is it worth adding, Donna, that in the slide pack for Julie, slides 7 to 9 have got some of the detailed finance breakdowns, Julie, and it does show some of the issues in a bit more detail that Donna has actually just explained as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see it's now sort of a past 3 o'clock, and I know you all had to go at 3. So thank you very, very much for coming along. I think it's been a really useful session. I'm very sorry to anyone who hasn't had their questions answered, but if you'd like to email them over to me at inquiries@devonalc.org.uk, I will send those on to Kerry and the team, and we'll be able to get those answers for you. And as I said earlier, the recording and the slides are going to be shared with all our membership.
May I say thank you to Dalk as well, Rebecca, very much, you and Liz, for setting this up. And we would love to do this as often as you can bear it. So, you know, this is just hello.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Always happy to try and help. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.